Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Showdown Strategy Show. This is the important one. This is what we need. Sim strategy show, tournament strategy show. Let's go, man. I mean, this is once we get to this point of the week, and it's a little different with the Super Bowl than it would be with other like primary slates, even smaller slates throughout the postseason, because there's only one game and you've had 2 weeks to prepare for this. We know who's going to play. We know who isn't going to play, but you have some refined projections because we know what we're getting into. But at the same time, and I haven't done a show with Greg yet this week. Greg is back. It was Danny Burke and myself on Wednesday. Greg and I usually do Wednesday and Friday. So, hey, Greg. But every year, DraftKings and any site with DFS, they haven't explicitly said this, but it's obvious. We've been doing this long enough to know the pricing is softer for a Super Bowl showdown, right? With a $5 million prize pool in a game where a lot of casuals will likely jump into the fold. So that actually makes this more interesting than your typical like Monday or Thursday showdown slate, Greg, that you and I did live before Lock 4 ran the Sims. It's definitely different. Whereas it's not hard to build. You're not going to get everybody you want. You never can. But it's not hard to build lineups despite being a lot of top tier players on this slate.
And they kind of have to price it that way because like you had said at the top, we know who's going to be in and out, and it's the Super Bowl. Basically, everybody's going to be in. There's also the week off for players to get healthy. And then also, it's the two best teams in the league playing against each other. So you get a lot of star players in the game. If you were to actually price everybody in this game how they're normally priced over the course of regular season showdown slates, it would be nearly impossible to build lineups because all these guys would be really expensive and there'd be literally zero value. So you'd run into situations where you'd have potentially like multiple zeros in a winning lineup if you were to price these guys like they were over the course of the regular season. So they kind of have to make it softer pricing.
They do. But just so we all know what we're getting into, because it's pretty obvious that it's a bit softer. I haven't looked yet. I ran the Sims on Wednesday, but really just a cursory, like a glance at that, Greg, using the single lineup, the way you and I do kind of for guidance. Didn't look through really any significant exposures, any real build types or anything like that. So this is new to me. Jacob behind the scenes ran the Sims. We ran it at 10K and 20% the first, because it actually, unlike a lot of these showdowns, which are like 33% the first, this is a 20% the first payout on DraftKings, Greg. It's 100K up top, but a $5 million prize pool. I don't want to say the pay structure is necessarily flat, right? But it's still flatter than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Normally when we have these Millie Maker showdowns, it's like a $2 million prize with $1 million to first. So this is definitely a flatter payout structure than we normally see for showdown. Now, ultimately, there are so many entries in this contest that there's probably going to be 50, 60 people that split first. So it's going to be something like, even if it was top heavy, it was probably going to be so spread out that it wouldn't actually alter what the payout is for the top. But it is a massive prize pool.
Our friend Jake DeWitt asked a question on Wednesday that I'll ask you here. I gave an answer to it, but curious to get your thoughts. I have two questions for you out of the gate before we start digging into these lineups. One, do you think there will be, and feel free to just answer these in succession, bank them up here, Greg. Do you think there will be more dead money than usual?
Yes.
Or is that okay. Yes, you said considerably more?
Yeah, just because of how public this game is.
I'm just wondering, like, how public can DFS get at this stage of the game? At this, definitely more public, but I don't know. I haven't even seen advertising for it.
Well, the other part of this too is if there isn't more public money in it, then it means there's going to be overlay. It has to be one or the other.
Good. Yes, very true. I was trying to see on DraftKings Sportsbook if they had. Sometimes they'll put like DFS stuff in there. I don't even see it on DraftKings Sportsbook. Why wouldn't you, right? Like, why wouldn't you put it on the Sportsbook to get people in? Wouldn't you think that would be something that you'd want to do?
You would think but DraftKings and FanDuel who have really deprioritized DFS relative to what it was to them a few years ago. Now, part of that I think was because there was always the plan to where the purpose of DFS was to ultimately port people over to sports betting. And now that's what they've started to do. And I don't necessarily think they want people to go back. I think they could, and both could be supported, but that's, at least to this point, that's not what DraftKings and FanDuel have done. They've made sports betting really their priority, but maybe it's something they end up changing. But at least here's where I think that could change. If there is overlay, I think they'll start pushing it on Sportsbook. But as of right now, yeah, I just logged into the Sportsbook and I don't have anything listed here.
Second question. Do you think public entries can throw a wrench into the works as far as ownership projections go, or build types go when we're talking about the sims, right? Because we know the sims are factoring in build types heavily. Like when we're running the contest generator and we're generating a pool, a simulated pool of 10,000 here, a lot of that comes down to what type of builds are in here. So when you sim these lineups, you're seeing what sims out the best, which gives you the most, the highest simulated ROI, what wins the most, what finishes top 10% the most, so on and so forth, right? So do you think there is an element there to that, or will it be negligible because there are so many entries in a contest like this?
I think it's going to be negligible because there isn't some outstanding value option that stands out on the slate. Where it would stand out is, let's say that just not, and by the way, this is not a real scenario, but just making a hypothetical one up. Let's say Dallas Goedert was to be ruled out, like something catastrophic happens to his knee, and then Grant Calcaterra is all of a sudden like the surefire top value play on the slate. That's something that I think the general public that isn't normally playing DFS wouldn't be thinking, oh my God, I need to get Grant Calcaterra in my lineups. Since there isn't any value that exists like that on the slate, I don't think it's going to impact it. But if something crazy was to change, I don't think that the people who normally play DFS would react to it.
Lee said, I think we see a lot more casual lineups that try to use cheap captains just to jam their favorite players, which of course isn't smart. Yeah, maybe you do. Or maybe you just see everybody jamming, like a lot of the casuals jamming the Barkley captain and stuff like that. I could see that too. I wonder, like, do you just see less of like Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith type captains, right? Like those type of guys, like Hollywood Brown, kind of those mid-range guys that kind of get glossed over. That's again, this could all just be negligible, right? But just talking through this, you mentioned it. Like if there ever was going to be, we'll say public money, or a larger amount of public entries coming into a contest, it's the Super Bowl. And my argument would be it's like week 1 of the regular season.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, as far as our ownership goes right now, it's pretty spread out. I mean, we've got 5 captains projected for double-digit ownership over on DraftKings, none of them being more popular than 20% owned. All of them are pretty well below that. Then as far as ownership goes in the flex spot, there's only one player, Patrick Mahomes, projected for more than 50% flex ownership. So we are looking at pretty spread out ownership. There's not one player who it's like they're going to be 90% owned or anything.
Oh, absolutely. All right, you ready to dig into it?
Let's do it. Let's start looking.
They haven't. Okay. So just placing a few portfolio EV. It's so easy. You can do it at work.
Yeah. Or your work is placing the bets.
It's both, man. It's both. All right. Anyway, let's go. All right. Happy to have you guys with us. Oh, and if you don't mind, take a single second, atone for your sins this morning. This is the second to last time I'm going to be able to say that on an NFL show this season. Shit, it's sad. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. What type of builds are you guys going with? Like I said, let us know in chat now, but if you're listening afterwards, leave some comments. Are you guys, because I try and read, at the very least, read all of these, respond to as many as possible. Are you guys looking at some unique, weird builds, or are you staying close to the vest, and kind of going, not like cookie cutter style, but, maybe just a little bit different, leaving some cap space? We're going to figure out what we're doing right now, Greg. So let's make it happen. First things first. And by the way, you ever want to listen to our shows, any sport in podcast form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be, eliminate some of those ads if you don't have YouTube Premium. but the top sim lineup by a pretty wide margin right now is a Barkley captain with Goddard, Butker, Brown, Elliott, and Mahomes. One thing I will say that I remember from Wednesday is that kickers are showing up a lot. And I'm not opposed to that at all. Getting to kickers in a dome game, Super Bowl, where it could shoot out, but also you have two quality defenses. I mean, two really good defenses. If this game ends up being played largely in between the 20s, that wouldn't shock me all that much at all. So you're not going to see me with much pushback on getting to kickers in this game, even though you have two high-powered offenses.
Yeah, especially with what we were talking about at the top of the show, with there being a limited amount of value on this slate. We have to save salary somewhere. And if we don't have these guys who are like a backup running back who's going to be in the mix in a way that they might during a regular season showdown slate, where else are we going to save salary? And as is, our data typically likes to push us towards kickers for showdown slates. So I think it's just kind of inevitable that we're going to land on a lot of kicker exposure, because if not the kickers, who are you saving salary with? Like, I don't feel great about going to like Kenneth Gainwell. It's the Super Bowl. The Eagles are going to give Barkley all the touches he could possibly handle. So you got this situation where we've got a lot of studs to pay up for. We've got two really high-performing quarterbacks in Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. We've got Travis Kelce. We've got Saquon Barkley. These are all guys we want to pay up for. We have to save salary somewhere, and there just aren't that many guys that project well outside the kickers for cheap. Yeah,
there aren't. That's exactly what it comes down to, right? You nailed it. You've got a situation now where, like, there are a few. I'll say this much. I'm not shying away from some of these cheap guys, right? I'm not going to be shying away from some of these cheap guys. Absolutely not. But I will, however, and what I mean by that is, like, sorry, I'm trying to get some lineups favored on my side right now. If it sounds like I'm speaking in riddles, I'm not going to be shying away from guys like, some Watson or some Noah Gray, because with Kansas City, I mean, how many ways are there to skin a cat with this offense? Like, you see it all the time, right? And we've seen it. I know I'm a broken record, but we've seen it a lot with, like, the Chiefs back when they faced Philly 2 years ago. It was Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney that had touchdowns. Mecole Hardman against the Niners last year in that overtime win was in the optimal. Am I saying that happens again this year? No, of course not. What I am saying, though, is that it's very much not out of the realm of possibility that one of these cheap Kansas City guys ends up being viable, which, with that in mind, is why if I am going cheap, I would be deprioritizing Philly and getting to more Kansas City as a result. Think of it like this. If you wanted to use, Greg, like odds and to kind of further elucidate this point, if you look at total reception props for Kansas City and the Eagles, meaning like total players to catch a pass, Chiefs are at 8.5 and Eagles are at 5.5. That should say a lot about this slate from a DFS perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought to go look at it. It certainly makes sense, though. Patrick Mahomes has always spread the ball out, and now even more so than ever, he doesn't really have, Travis Kelce to an extent. Like, that's his number one most trusted option, but there's no Tyreek Hill there anymore. There's nothing like that. And then on top of that, they have a lot of quality receivers where they've got Hopkins, they've got Worthy, they've got Brown. There's a lot of different guys for them to look for. And then also, they're playing 3 running backs at this point as well. So just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about all the different guys. You got the 3 running backs, you've got Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, then you've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Hopkins, and you've got Worthy. So right there, I think that's just 9 players I listed off. So yeah, 8.5 makes a lot of sense. It's going to be spread out.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, man. So we'll see. By the way, Gainwell yesterday practiced in full. So I think you and I would agree he's going to be out there.
Yeah, to an extent. Like, he'll be out there in terms of he'll be available, but
yes.
Will he actually be that involved? Probably not.
No, I mentioned to Ben on Tuesday that the way I see this playing out is that you probably don't want to give Will Shipley a ton of meaningful touches in the Super Bowl. Yes, he got some work in that blowout where they were up by 30 or 25 or whatever. late in that Washington game in the championship. But also look at the Saquon Barkley game against the Rams, right? Where he played 90% of the snaps. Gainwell played 10. Will Shipley didn't see the field. He was active, but didn't see the field in either of those two games. Gainwell went down with a concussion, and then there was a blowout, which introduced Will Shipley into the mix. Otherwise, and yes, he looked great, but Washington at that point had given up, right? And the Eagles had just bludgeoned them in the trenches. So the way I see it is like, if Barkley has a long run and is tripped up at the 5, taken down at the 5 or something, and they're running a play like right after that and he needs a breather, probably see some Gainwell. I think realistically, you see Gainwell getting, let's say, like six or seven snaps, and that's not even touches. Maybe less, honestly. Maybe like 4 or 5 snaps for Gainwell.
Yeah, and the odds of him being in a winning lineup in that limited amount of touches, it's pretty unlikely. So, some of these guys I'm seeing, like Peter in the chat saying Gainwell scoring now just to troll us for this. Yeah, I think Gainwell is pretty dependent on either a massive blowout, which not all that likely in a game that has a 1-point spread, or Barkley getting injured, which, also not all that likely, but that's probably the most likely way Gainwell will land in a winning lineup.
Dude, even if it's a blowout, I don't think. Like, it's still the Super Bowl.
True.
The season's over after this. I think it's, yes, Barkley injury, or like I said, Barkley rips off like a 60-yarder and needs a breather. That I think that's the most realistic way that Gainwell could score. But then, even in that case, you still have to worry about Jalen Hurts getting the. Like, if Barkley gets tripped up at the 2, are they handing it off to Gainwell, or are you just trying to push the line into the end zone with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, it's probably just going to be Jalen Hurts. I mean, the tush push now, how many years have we seen it? Like 3 at this point, and it's been the most unstoppable play in the league. The only reason that the Eagles even get away from it at times during the regular season is to preserve the health of Jalen Hurts, which, like you said before, it's the Super Bowl. That goes out the window to an extent at this point in the season. So, you get down to the 1-2 yard line after a big run from Saquon Barkley, and it probably is just Jalen Hurts being pushed into the end zone. And then also, I mean, we saw the last time we did this show was 2 weeks ago, and everybody's like, oh my God, Saquon Barkley's projected for 1 billion% ownership. How do we get off him? And we couldn't, right? When we were running lineups through the Sims, he was showing up in everything a couple of weeks ago. Then when we tried to run lineups for the single lineup sim, we tried to see what we could do without Saquon Barkley. And it was impossible to plus EV lineups without him. And some people are like, I will not play a guy who's that high owned. What happens? The first touch Saquon Barkley has, it's a 60-yard touchdown. And then it's like you needed him from the first play of the entire game there. So I don't really want to be all that invested in the backup running back situation for the Eagles.
Yeah, and look, let me be clear. I'm not necessarily projecting the Rams or Washington type of performance from Barkley, but all of your points still 100% stand. Like, it was nice. The single lineup sim and the Sims had some guardrails set up for us last week, where it was kind of like, listen, you could try to build these lineups, but we're not going to lie to you. We're not going to lie to you and tell you that these are quality lineups, and they weren't. Barkley went on to have, and Lee said Hurts and Barkley suck up all the touchdowns unless the Eagles are trailing and need to air it out. Yeah, to me, I see it like similarly in the sense of, yes, like if you who are the guys that are most likely to score for Philly? It's those guys, but also I'm not putting it past them. AJ Brown, Goddard, Smith can all still score. Absolutely. It's once you get past that you are just in like essentially uncharted territory. And if they do something, it might just be because they're trying something neat for the Super Bowl. But aside from that, I don't know. It's going to be tough. Brandon Smith, would you play defense in flex, or would captain still be viable? I think to be viable, you're hoping for a defensive touchdown. Yeah, I think the one issue that I'm running into, and we can pull up exposures here, is, let me go to flex.
Yeah, it's what Jacob's got the flex pulled up right here. We're not getting that much. And he asked about captain as well. I'll see what the Sims have to say. I do not want to be playing the defenses in the captain spots, though. Maybe the Sims feel way differently. And if it's something that's like way off from what my perception is. Maybe that would have to make me change my mind. But to me, this, with the quality of the offenses in this game, you may need 2 defensive touchdowns for one of the defenses to be in the optimal captain spot. So if you wouldn't mind, Jacob, can you go to the captain? I just want to see if we have any exposure to the defenses here. No, we don't. Like zero across 150 lineups, 0% of both defenses.
I ran it on mine and I got one Eagles lineup. I think another reason for that too, though, is that you could just pay a little bit more to get to Jake Elliott or Harrison Butker, and the kickers just project better in a spot like this. Noah Gray, I'm getting more of than the defense. I have 13% at the flex. Justin Watson, I have 10%. And we can obviously look at this. Sometimes it's just difficult for me to see the screen. Let me look at our exposures on the sims that we ran for the show. Noah Gray, go to flex, Jacob. Let's just compare some of the value and the kicker. So wait, scroll up for a second. 46% Butker at captain, 31% Elliott. Do you see any other cheap guys? Noah Gray at 11%. No, 18%. Juju 15. Keep going down here. Even Hollywood Brown, right? Like he's 5,400. So it's just, they're in kind of a no man's land where you've got guys below them that point per dollar project better and also aren't pulling ownership. And then guys above them, including kickers, they just look a whole lot better. I think that's probably what it comes down to.
There's also just a capped ceiling on defenses. Like there isn't a scenario where a defense is going to have, like a 12-point play. It doesn't exist. There's a scenario where a cheap wide receiver catches a 60-yard touchdown pass. It's even a great game for a defense. It's really hard for them to outscore some of the top players on the slate at other positions. So if you have a lineup or two with them in the flex spot, cool. It's not my favorite play on the slate, but I don't have an issue with it. But playing defense in the captain spot, that is something I have an issue with for the slate.
What do you want to look at next? I mean, we can go back to exposures, but I'm kind of interested to see what the builds themselves look like.
Yeah, I also want to see who we're underweight to, because I know that's something that's we don't address that a ton when we do these shows, but a lot of that is because we aren't doing 1-game slates, and it's just more so like, hey, 10-game slate, these are the guys we want to roster. I also think it's relevant who are the players that the Sims are viewing as over-owned right now.
Sure, let's do that first. Go to exposures, and then Jacob, go to leverage, and then filter it by negative leverage. Hurts. Oh, wait, that's cap. Do we want to go to, well, yeah, you want to do captain first and then flex?
Yeah, we can look at both individually.
All right. So Hurts, Smith, Worthy, AJ Brown. And keep in mind, some of this leverage, feel free to just jump in though, Greg. Like some of this leverage to me isn't, or negative leverage or underweight isn't super significant. Like Xavier Worthy, if you're getting 8 compared to 12 or 7.5 compared to 10.5 for AJ Brown, or 9.3 to 11 for Kelsey, that doesn't stand out to me as like, oh man, that's scary. It's just, you can't be with or above the field on everybody.
Yeah, and it's also pretty clear there's a correlation here in terms of what our Sims like. It's Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' run game. Because what we're getting underweight to is Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, AJ Brown. Those are 3 of the 4 players. And also, the way you said before, we're not even significantly underweight to AJ Brown, just a little bit. The 2 players we're actually significantly underweight to are Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. But on the flip side, if you look at who we're most overexposed to, it's Patrick Mahomes and Saquon Barkley, players that we're overweight to there. So if we're really liking Saquon Barkley in our simulations, it makes sense just from a logic standpoint that like, oh yeah, we like the Eagles passing game less. We like the Eagles run game a lot more. So just kind of an interesting way that our data is looking at this game.
Definitely. Jacob, sort by positive leverage. Just want to make sure Mahomes is okay. Yeah, that was the whole screen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Mahomes and Barkley. That's 53% right there. Almost 53%.
Really, the only 2 players we're overweight to in a way that matters, because we don't have anybody else more than 2% overweight to. It's all right. We got 3% of Harrison Butker at 1% captain ownership. We got 6% of Hollywood Brown at 4.6% ownership. We're getting overweight to Patrick Mahomes. We're getting overweight to Saquon Barkley, neither of which are all that popular, 16 and 13% ownership. And then it's just some of the other popular guys we like less of.
Right. Like if you sort by exposure, like we're underweight to AJ Brown, but he's still top 5.
Yeah.
Good point. Kelsey. Yeah, good point. And Worthy, he's one of our most negative. Yeah. So that stands out. Now, would you leave it like this, or would you try to smooth it out a little bit, or would you be okay with just rolling? Because 30% Mahomes at captain in the Super Bowl seems like a lot. 1% Jalen Hurts, 30% Mahomes.
One thing that I really think benefits Patrick Mahomes for this game from a showdown perspective, he's not all that expensive. He's $10,000 in the flex. He's $15,000 in the captain. I would feel differently if we're looking at Patrick Mahomes as what his normal price is, which is like around where Saquon Barkley is for this game. But that's not where he's at. He's somewhat inexpensive relative to expectations. Like you've got Patrick Mahomes is only a few $100s more expensive than AJ Brown.
Yeah, true. And better cheap attachments to Patrick Mahomes as well. You know,
rushing upside as well.
What's that?
I said in rushing upside as well. That's always something we talk about. We do some of these showdown slates is if you're going to roster a quarterback in the captain spot, do they have the ability to run the football? And Patrick Mahomes, the answer is very clearly yes. And then a couple of other things that I think play into his benefit here is probably more likely to put his body on the line, considering that it's a high leverage postseason game. Yep. We've seen that so far. If you look at the rushing attempts for Patrick Mahomes, he did not have a single game in the regular season with more than 6 rushing attempts, Laffy. In 2 playoff games, he has 7 and 11 rushing attempts. It's very clear that he's more willing to put himself in harm's way in these high leverage games.
Was the 11 in the Bills game or the Texans game?
Bills game, he had 11.
There you go. Yeah, right. Look at that. Interesting. Brandon Smith said, I like Hurts and Smith at the captain because I think Philly plays from behind, not much. Look, yeah, if you wanted to play your own narratives here and tell a story with how you think this game plays, then definitely, right? Like that definitely makes sense. I'll say this much though, even if they are playing from behind, I don't know how much that would get me away from Barkley regardless, because you know, you're still going to want one of your best playmakers on the field, one of your most elusive guys with the ball in his hands on the field. So no issues with that at all. If you were trying to get more Hurts and Devonta Smith at captain, would you just look to boost them at captain? Is that what you would do? Just manual boost there? Or how would you play that?
Yeah, if I really felt that there was some guy who had massive upside that I wasn't getting to, whoever the player is, then I would do an ROI boost to them. And you could also, Jacob, if you go to the ROI boost for a second, just because this is something that we don't normally look at here, you could do ROI boost separately for players in the flex or the captain spot. So you just go to the individual player in the captain spot, and I'd boost them there. And that would only make them look better in lineups where they're the captain. That's the way that would make most sense to me.
That's what I would do as well. Go to flex exposure. Let's see here. Mahomes, Barkley. What's kind of wild is that we only have still 34% Jalen Hurts at captain, and Devonta Smith. I think we need to scroll. So Devonta Smith is going to be, Jacob, do me a favor, sort by negative leverage on, and then go to the top. So Devonta Smith here, Greg, is clearly, with the way projections and ownership are right now, and we'll have another update before the Super Bowl kicks off, clearly, along with Jalen Hurts, those two guys are far and away our most negatively leveraged players, or let's say not negative. Those two guys are the guys that we would be most underweight on.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up right now. What are the props on Devonta Smith? See, what's his receiving prop? Yeah, you can see why. So Devonta Smith, for reference, has an over-under 52.5 receiving yards, and he's $7,400. Look at what's the price again on Dallas Goedert?
What is it, like 54 or something? 58?
Right. So Dallas Goedert is $5,800. with similar ownership to Devonta Smith. Do you know what the difference is in the receiving prop?
6 yards.
3. Smith's is 52.5. Goddard's is 49.5.
Wow.
So you've got two guys who, at least how the sports books are looking at them, are very, very comparable for this game. But for DFS purposes, Devonta Smith is $1,600 more expensive on DraftKings. So just considering that, it makes sense why we'd be underweight to Devonta Smith and instead looking at either paying up to go a little bit more expensive or just going cheap and getting somebody who's going to project comparably you're saving salary with.
Jacob, how much Goddard are we getting?
34%.
Yeah. So we're with the field. I think we're with the field on Goddard at captain and at flex. I'm on the live odds screen right now and on OddsShopper. That's free, by the way. Use that. Helps for DFS too. Goddard on DraftKings is 52.5. On Penny, he's 53.5, but juice, minus 129 on the under. Devonta Smith on DraftKings and on Penny, Craig, DraftKings and on Penny has a lower receiving yards prop than Dallas Goedert.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely so, at worst, they're comparable.
What about, let's see, receptions and touchdown prop?
I wouldn't be surprised if Goddard has more likely to score touchdowns as far as the prop market goes as well.
4.5 receptions, heavy juice on the over for Goddard. Some books are at minus 155. Devontae, 4.5. Yeah. If you want to look at Penny, Goddard, minus 124 to the over. Devonta Smith, minus 101. Yeah, everywhere. If you factor in juice, Devonta Smith has we'll say, lower projection for receptions than Dallas Goedert. That's pretty crazy. So your point stands. Now, I'll say this much. Devonta Smith has that electric upside, but if you're getting overweight to him, you're playing for a very, very specific type of situation, right? It's not like Devonta Smith has become the guy, especially in a run-first offense with a mobile quarterback and a tight end that's been used heavily throughout the postseason and an alpha wide receiver in A.J. Brown. You're playing for a very specific game to unfold here in the Super Bowl with Devonta Smith.
There's so many good players to be rostering in this game. And it's, once again, it's not like we're here sitting like that Devonta Smith is unplayable.
Not at all.
To what you had said before, we have to make this, we can't play everybody. We have to make decisions about if we're playing a bunch of lineups, who we want to be overweight to, who we want to be underweight to. And just some of these data points we've brought up, it seems to make most sense to me to be underweight to Devonta Smith when you get comparable players who are cheaper.
Goddard to score plus 295. Devonta Smith plus 230. So actually shorter odds on Smith to score, but all in all, they project very, very, very similarly. By the way, I mentioned at the top of the show that I've been inconspicuously, or possibly conspicuously, if you guys are paying attention, placing bets throughout the show with Portfolio EV. I mean, look at this beauty right here. You see that? It's all here. Mass enter, DraftKings, 4 bets, boom, redirect me straight to DraftKings, and then it instantly loads those bets onto your screen where you can click them immediately. FanDuel, DraftKings, Hard Rock, Caesars, BetMGM, all of them have the mass entry tool. It's a beautiful thing. And right now we've got 75% off your first month. Let me tell you something. If you're going into the Super Bowl being like, man, it's ending, what am I going to do? First of all, Portfolio EV just makes it wildly easy to buoy those losses when you have a bad NFL or bad DFS day. The amount of times this season, because we all know, like you guys have been with us all year, Greg will tell you, bad NFL Sundays are going to happen for DFS without question. The amount of times I've been like, oh man, this is going to be a bad week. And then I end up just profiting on the day and having a big week overall because I'm getting as many bets in as I can. You guys have heard me say this 1,000 times. Here's 1,001. Like there is simply no better way to make money and to profit right now with a minimal time commitment and not having to know anything about the sport. I was thinking about this the other day where it was like with certain sports that populate and we get bets for Portfolio EV, I don't know them well, like hockey. And it's great because I don't even consider the variables that go into those props. I just bet them immediately. I feel like it'd be so much better if I knew nothing about any of these sports. Greg, I know you're the same, but I've kind of trained myself, barring weird injury stuff and like, first movers. I've trained myself just if a bet pops up, I'm betting it because we've seen the results firsthand. And the OddsShopper Hall of Fame page over on Twitter has been massive lately. I have 62 bets in already. It's not even 11 o'clock Eastern. So SB75 at checkout gets you your first month for less than $25. Who cares if you're starting with $100, $200 bankroll? It doesn't matter. If there's no better way to grow your bankroll. There's no better way to buoy a DFS losses. I can't say enough about it. SB75, links in the description and in chat. And if you have questions, Greg and I always have our DMs open. We're always happy to answer them. But yeah, man, it's just been an awesome tool. And I know you're using it every day as I am as well.
Yeah, what I've been saying is it's what cash games used to be for DFS. You're just not going to, even if you build plus EV lineups for GPPs, you're expected to lose most of those entries. There's going to be days where you finish at the top of a GPP and then you realize what your expected ROI is, but there's a ton of variance in tournaments and we don't have super beatable cash games like there were in the past, but we do have really beatable prop lines. And this is what I consider cash games now.
Me too. And you know that you're betting beatable lines. It's when EV betting, people think it's just top-down market-based bet. It's really just when you're getting a bet that has a higher chance of winning than the odds the books are giving you, right? So like even profit boost and promos are plus EV. But in this case, we're calculating the true odds using the sharp source. So like when you look at something and you go, oh, wow, I'm getting it at plus 120. The true odds are even money, but the book's giving me plus 120 every single time. You don't even have to be intelligent to know that is a good bet, right? And then you can do that 100. I got over 100 bets in easily yesterday. Had another profitable day. 3 great days in a row. February's looking good. Check it out. Hit us up with questions. We want to help you guys get started. And look, it's not DFS where if one person wins, another person loses. In this case, it's us against the books in order to try and snipe them when there's discrepancies in the market. And this is how we found to do it. And it's just, proof's in the pudding. We're transparent. Everything is there. You can see what bets are profitable and what aren't and bet them. So check it out. SB75 at checkout. It's great stuff, man. You guys will love it. And you'll win money. That's all that matters. All right, let's look at some individual builds here.
One more thing, just because you mentioned, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring this up, because you mentioned sniping. Go check out the new video that Loughran's been doing on Twitter, where he's going live in the middle of days and he's just walking through some of the bets that he's placing from Portfolio EV. You guys should be checking that out if you aren't. Yeah, I think it'll be super helpful too. And enjoyable. I'm trying to provide some entertainment, usually like 3 Eastern, whenever a bunch of bets pop up. But 3 Eastern, Monday through Friday, over on X, formerly known as Twitter. Come check it out. I don't tweet all that often, so turn notifications on. You'll know exactly when it goes live, All right. Let's take a look at individual builds. And I'm going to throw this over to you. I'm not going to say anything. I want to know what your initial thoughts are on, say, like the top 20 builds that you're seeing on the screen. Well, it looks like we have, 13, 14 lineups. I don't know if our Sims are trolling the resident Eagles fan Laufey here, but we only have one lineup that's even a 3-3 lineup here. Every other lineup, and yeah, it looks like 13 lineups on screen here. 12 out of the 13 have more Chiefs players than they have Eagles players. You see Jacob just scrolled down and got another 6 lineups on screen. How far do we have to go down before we have a lineup that's skewed towards the Eagles? It is, pretty far down. It's like our 20-ish lineup is a 4-2 Eagles lineup. At least per our simulations, Laufey, we're preferring the Chiefs side of this game to the Eagles. I think that's probably what was catching your eye as well.
Yes, first thing. There were 2 things. That, but also every lineup that is a Chiefs 4 or 5 also has Saquon Barkley. So like while we're favoring the Chiefs in number, Saquon Barkley seems to be in like every single. Jacob, if you were to just go to exposures real quick and just go to all, actually, no, go to flex real quick, 53%, and then go to captain. All right. So we have what, like 80% Barkley?
Yeah.
So
a little bit under, but yeah, right around there.
Yeah. Yeah, we're almost at 80%. You can go back to lineups. What? Yeah, good call. Let's scroll and see what some of the primary Eagles lineups look like, if there's any of them. How far do we have to go?
Yeah, you have to go to I mean, I would really need my autism to kick in to figure out exactly what number lineup it was before he got some more Eagles, but it was something like the 21st lineup is 4-2 Eagles lineup. Before that, Jacob, every single other lineup, it's Chiefs side of the game being favored.
Jacob, just go up and find the first one. That's first one from the top. Is that the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's Worthy captain, Goddard, Butker, Elliott, Hurts, and Barkley. There's a 5-1 Philly. Barkley, Brown, Dotson, Elliott, and Hurts. Keep going. See if we can find a couple more here. Man, there are not a lot. If anything, there's a lot of 3-3s, but
yeah.
5-1, Barkley, Brown, Eagles, Elliott, Hurts, and Juju. Oh, dear, that's scary. Not in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, that one right there is not projected of any dupes, but that's a lineup right there that's just playing a game script where, the Eagles win like 34-3 or something like that.
What was the score of the Chiefs-Bucks Super Bowl?
I don't remember.
Hold on.
31-9.
What?
31-9.
Was there anybody viable for the Chiefs in that game?
Let's see.
I wasn't sure if you could pull the box score up real quick.
Yeah, I'll have it up in like 5 seconds. All right, so Buccaneers 31, Chiefs 9. From the Chiefs side of the game, Mahomes had a garbage game. CEH, yes. All right, Travis Kelce had 10 catches for 133 yards. He was the only one, though.
That'll play.
He was the only one.
That was the big Devin White game. Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, you got Play a Hater in chat saying not trying to hold hands if I win. He said I'm fading Barkley in huge contests, YOLO. I didn't see that part. Yeah, look. I mean, it depends. Are you playing how many lineups? If you want no Barkley, it's scary. But
I'll be honest with you, too. Just because you're fading Barkley, that doesn't mean you're going to have unique lineups. You could have some, but it depends what you're doing with those lineups. Don't think you have a unique set. Here's something that would be really annoying is if you take a big stand like that, you fade Barkley, and then your lineups are all still duped a bunch of times. There's still more levers you have to pull to be unique. Because while we have Barkley projected for a good amount of ownership, it's not like he's going to be 90% owned. I know we have almost 80% exposure to him in our lineups, but if you go to Jacob, can you go to the ownership page really quick? What's the total ownership on Barkley? Yeah, this works too. So we've got Barkley projected for 13% ownership in the captain, then click on the flex. And then, we've only got Barkley projected for 55% ownership in the flex and captain combined. Half the lineups in the field still are expected to not have Barkley in them.
Right. Let's do this. Let's close the show out with this. Can you go back to lineups, Jacob? Go to filters. Lineup on the left. No, go on I guess it both would work, but lineup filters. And then player does not contain Barkley. Let's see what levers we have to pull, Greg.
I like it. I assume this is going, but we didn't have very many Hurts lineups.
Hold on,
is that to the field? I assume these are going to be the Hurts lineups, though.
Yeah. Well, let's
Jacob,
see.
I like how you spelled his name like it was the SpongeBob meme.
All right. Butker, Smith, Hollywood Brown, Hurts, Mahomes, Kelsey. Mahomes, Brown, Goddard, Butker, Hollywood Brown, and Travis Kelsey. There's not even that much Jalen Hurts in these, honestly. It's just looks like a decent amount of pass catchers for Philly. Or no, you know what a lot of them look like is just like 5-1 and 4-2 Kansas City.
Yeah, which, yeah, I mean, you could see that being the scenario too, where it's just like the inverse of that Buccaneers game we just looked at, where if the Chiefs win 31-9, and then you're not getting a lot of points scored out of the Eagles offense. And then you get that scenario. It's like maybe there's one guy from the Eagles who's relatively decent, but that game we just looked at where the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs 31-9, Patrick Mahomes threw for 270 yards and had two interceptions and no touchdowns. So yeah, maybe that's the game script that the Sims are seeing is most likely. If Barkley doesn't succeed, it's just a blowout win for the Chiefs.
If that ends up being the case, then yeah, it works. But you make a pretty salient point there. You're just not playing Barkley doesn't mean like, wow, I'm so much different. You need to, as Ben puts it, you need to thread the needle in a way where not only does Barkley not produce, but also the build that you have is how it plays out. Because if Barkley doesn't produce, what does that mean? That could mean one of a few things, that the Eagles just get stymied all game and they don't do much. And now at this point, you're hoping for the KC 5-1 type of build, right? Or it's just a low scoring game in general. And Barkley doesn't do great, but he's still optimal because nobody else is great. Or the Eagles go to the air and they produce that way in a shootout where Barkley is less involved and they do something different than we've seen all season long. Those are just three ways that this could play out that you'd still need to nail down without playing Barkley.
And then one other thing too, while we're on this screen, could you sort by dupes, Jacob? Don't remove the filter. I just want to see what lineups are expected to be. Yeah, like you'll see here, there are still lineups that are expected to be very, very heavily duped that do not have Barkley in them. Like this one, 20. And also keep in mind, we built 10,000 lineups here, whereas the actual Super Bowl contest, how many entries are in that thing? Yeah, 300,000. All right. So take these and then multiply it by 30. And that's more or less what we're about expecting out of dupes here. So these are still lineups that were expected to be duped around 600 times that don't have Saquon Barkley.
Wow.
Mahomes, Smith, Butker, Hollywood Brown, Kelsey, Worthy. See, these top lineups on screen, all of them are expected to be duped anywhere from 400 to 600 times, and none of them have Saquon in them.
Wow. Good call looking that up. Yeah, right. And that's only in a 10,000 contest. Yeah. Right? Right. Hey, anything else before we go?
I just because Jacob ran the Sims for FanDuel, a lot of it's going to kind of be the same. But let's just pull up FanDuel really quick, just see the players that we're getting to the most in the MVP spot and the flex. And once again, the analysis isn't going to be all that much different, but just kind of looking at what the exposures are like. And yeah, a lot of Mahomes and Barkley, no real surprise there. Still coming in underweight to the field on Jalen Hurts. And then in the flex spot over on FanDuel, even more so getting to the kickers. Harrison Butker in half of our lineups in the flex spot. Where's Jake Elliott? Oh, there's Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott in 31%. So big kicker stands over on FanDuel, getting a ton of kicker exposure.
It makes sense. With those price points, it totally does. All right. Good stuff. Hey, you can find Greg at Ehrenberg DFS. Follow his bankroll builder and everything else we've got going on. Myself at Laffy_D. Check that show out, 3 p.m. Eastern today around. We're gonna find some great bets. If you've tailed the past couple of days, us just sniping these bets. I call it the snipe session because they disappear quickly at the odds that we're looking to get them at. We've had 2 really good days. We'll build some parlays out, maybe some SGPs if we've got enough, and some boost on the board from some of these books, and just find good bets for basketball, for hockey, and all that stuff. And come check it out. SB75, get your portfolio EV 75% off, less than $25 for the entirety of the month. So great time to do it. Anything else for the people before we head out?
No, that's going to do it. If you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, take advantage of the SB75 offer, and we'll be back here on Sunday. Sorry, you asked if I had any more things. I said no, and now I'm just adding things. Sunday, a little bit of a different timing for the big Sunday show, which we're obviously still doing for the Super Bowl. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to do it right up until lock, just because a lot of people are going to be going out, family, parties, and whatnot. So the show is going to be in the afternoon. I'm going to be doing my lineup building. We're going to have Lofty and Ben doing the deep dive, and then Matt and Eric on live before lock. But the show's going to be in the afternoon as opposed to it leading right up until lock to give people just more time to watch the show at their own leisure.
Yeah, man. And for those of you that can't tune in on Sunday or decide not to, thank you for an awesome season. It's been a lot of fun. Greg and I really love doing these shows. We took a slightly different approach this year than last year, and it seems to, you guys seem to have responded well to it, which is all we care about, right? Like, we want to give you guys the best info, try and make it, entertaining a little bit, but also give you guys good info going into every slate. You ever have any suggestions or feedback? We're open, man. Like, every year, Greg and I and a few others get together, and like every year before the season starts, and we decide, like, what do we think is the best approach for content? I know it's a long way out, but we'll bookmark any ideas you guys have and keep them in mind going into 2025 season. So shout out to Jacob for producing this all year as well. It's one of the more intensive shows that we have. We'll see you guys back here Sunday to wrap up the NFL season, Super Bowl 59. Have a good weekend. Peace.